what I'd like to do now is to transition to our last panel, which is about earthquake resiliency in California. And of course, before our keynote presentation, of course, but the last panel, I want to say a couple of words to thank my very good friend and member of my Trojan family, Ali Sahabi, who always is prepared to contribute when it comes to programs like this, and put together an amazing panel for you, moderated by another good friend, Tom Robinson, who was a former city manager and now, of course, an advisor to Optimum Seismic. So with that, Tom, if you're ready, I'm going to turn to you for you to be able to moderate your panel and introduce the panel members. Again, thank you very much for all of you being here. Tom.
Thank you very much, Professor. Appreciate the introduction. I want to start with just a few comments. Los Angeles County, we'll start with the good news. Los Angeles County leads the nation in its exposure to risk of death, injuries, and property destruction, and other economic losses from earthquakes and other disasters. That's the bad news, okay? Good news is we can do something about it. Those stats are from FEMA and a list they just put out. There are two other Southern California counties, Riverside and San Bernardino, that are also in the top 10 leaders in terms of risk. So this is an important conversation for Southern California and for our friends in Northern California also. What we're going to do in this panel is explore how public officials and business leaders can become catalysts for change and for improvement in terms of seismic resilience in the Golden State. Now, I'd like to start with a saying that we use a lot at Optimum Seismic. Earthquakes will happen, but they don't have to be disasters. As Frank just said, we can't stop them, but we can be prepared for them and we can be resilient to them. As a former city manager, I conducted, and a department director, I conducted emergency drills in our community for 28 years. And we moved fire trucks and police officers around, and we prepared for situations much like Frank talked about. We had a dairy, so we had cow problems, but there were lots of different things that we were prepared for. We worked with community groups, homeowners associations, churches, schools, all those people to teach them what they could do. But if we came up a little bit short, in my mind, in the years since I've left that position, we didn't study our risks enough. We didn't know where the weaknesses in our community physically were and what actions could be taken to mitigate those risks. So I'd like to share a few slides with you as we go forward here, and then I'll introduce our panel. There are basically five types of vulnerable buildings for earthquakes. And what I'd like you to do today, I'd like you to listen to what we're saying. I'd like you to reflect on what we're saying, and then I'd like you to go back to your jobs and your homes and your positions and act on what we're saying to mitigate your risks. Okay, next slide. Soft story buildings are probably one of the most common risks that we're aware of and have been aware of for decades. There are more than 100,000 of these buildings in California where you park underneath and then you have units above, but the supports for the above units isn't insufficient in an earthquake. And when there begins to be side-to-side movement, they collapse. And when they collapse, they kill people. There's 100,000 buildings. There's 2.5 million people living in those buildings. That's a huge exposure. Tilt-up buildings, another very common building you see in lots of communities. These buildings have their own problems. If they were built before the late 70s, they have weak connections to walls and the foundation and the roof. And what can happen is during an earthquake, those weak connections can crack and the roof can end up down on the floor rather than where it should be. So that can destroy everything in a building, including the people. That's not good. Let's go to the next slide. Steel moment frame construction uses rigid steel frames to support floors of a structure, but those frames can be brittle and fractures could occur when welded joints and beams move during an earthquake. That can be cured also, but it's a problem that people should be aware of. Next one, non-ductile concrete. These buildings built before 1978 have concrete floors or roofs that are supported by concrete walls and columns. Their rigid construction again and their limited capacity to absorb ground shaking makes them at risk for collapse and earthquakes. And the final slide for this group is unreinforced masonry. Fortunately, this particular hazard was recognized by the state in the 1980s, and they have since mitigated 80% of the unreinforced masonry building in California. There are many, many stakeholders in this equation that we're looking at here with earthquakes. There's the property owners, there's the tenants, there's government agencies, as has been discussed, there's the businesses themselves that want to continue operating in whatever fashion. There are the environmentalists that don't want to see buildings knocked down and then rebuilt with using all sorts of natural resources with additional costs and with environmental impacts of asbestos and lead and other types of things that can get into the water and the atmosphere. Also, lenders and insurers are stakeholders in this move for resilience. They are at risk. The properties that they are investing in are at risk, and their loans or their insurance policies are at risk. And we have an expert in that area on our panel today to talk a little more about that. So there are a number of stakeholders. All of these people are involved. All of these people are concerned. All of these people need to work together to resolve the problems that we saw with those several types of buildings. Now, I'd say one other thing. If we think about the soft story apartment buildings, those many experts believe should be our top priority now in addressing. They have so many people living in them, some 24 hours a day, some of them are off to work during the day, but those buildings house many, many people. Those people are often low income, they're working families, the elderly, minorities, other folks that can't afford to go anywhere else. Because those apartment buildings are older buildings, they're typically the more affordable buildings. So you have many, many units of affordable housing, but they're also risky housing. And that's not a good combination. We know how to address those buildings. We know how each of the types of buildings, we know how to make them safer. And we need a commitment from the business community, from homeowners, from elected officials to make that happen in our state. So with that, I'd like to introduce a little video that we have with us, and then I'll introduce the panel. Little video featuring Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, who a couple of months ago appeared at one of our job sites to make an announcement about the city of Los Angeles's earthquake retrofit program.
Buildings not only contain our lives and our families and our possessions, but buildings, if not properly reinforced, can be killers. And unfortunately, we saw that in 1994. A building just like this killed 17 people when this was flattened and these supports couldn't withstand a strong earthquake. Retrofitting all of these buildings, more than 12,000 of them here in Los Angeles, means the folks here will be alive after an earthquake. The apartments will still be here providing shelter for people. We won't ever be able to count the living. We'll only be able to count the lost. But we know people's lives will be saved because of these retrofits. So get retrofitted now.
With that, we do have three panelists with us today. We have Aaron Gross, who is the Chief Resilience Officer of the City of Los Angeles. We have Ross Stein, who I see on my screen right now. He is the CEO and co-founder of Tembler Inc., and Mark Benthian, Director of Communications and Education and Outreach for the Southern California Earthquake Center, SCEC. These gentlemen are experts in the earthquake field and are often quoted, and you've probably heard from them many times, but I think they will have some interesting comments for us today. I don't know, Ross, if you want to go first, why don't we have you go first? I don't see Aaron in the lineup there.
So Tom has beautifully spoken about the principal problems that we have in buildings. And let me just try to make it real and simple to you. This is a typical building. We build buildings out of stacks of cubes. And the attribute of a cube is that no matter how well it's tacked down to the surface, when an earthquake occurs, which is basically going to move that building from side to side, you can see it's very, very weak. And in fact, it's weak as its weakest corner. So the problem with this building is it has no structural integrity. And if you don't believe me, look at this. IKEA house. Just stick it in the back of your SUV and bring it home. And so the strengthening of these corners is crucial to the building, regardless of the strength of the columns and the beams. Okay, what is a seismic retrofit? Essentially, what happens is this is the exact same building, but I've just snapped in, get you closer to see it, these little corner braces. Okay, so what we're doing is giving the building shear resistance. Now look what happens. Nothing, and no torsion either. So this building is now able to sustain itself in an earthquake. We've solved the principal problems that the buildings have. They tend to be weak at the knees. Those are the soft story buildings, by adding shear support. And the shocking thing is simply to ask yourself, what is the cost difference between this building and this building? Come up with a number. It's embarrassingly low. It's about 2% of the cost of the building. Even if it's a building that's already built and needs to be retrofit, it'll never get even to 5%. This is the cost of a half bathroom. And this is what we need to do. So our job as earth scientists is to convince people who are at risk that they need to this building by fitting it. And it's that simple. Okay, now let me show you one other thing. And for that, I'm going to share my screen because I want to show you what it is we worry about and why it is that we really do need to make our buildings stronger. Okay, this is a map of the Bay Area. You remember the Bay Area, even if you're in LA. And this is a scenario of a 1-2 punch. This is a big magnitude 7 earthquake on the Hayward Fault that runs through Berkeley and Oakland and Hayward, connecting to the Rogers Creek Fault. It's actually the same fault, but faults are dumber than dogs. They don't know their own names. It's the same feature. And in this scenario, 2 weeks after earthquake 1, we have earthquake 2. Now, why is this scenario important? Because the Bank of England requires all insurers that do business in the UK to test their ability to survive this earthquake in terms of their financial reserves. So this is a reasonable scenario. And what are they coming up with? $75 billion in insured losses. And as you know, only about 15% of homes and buildings are insured. And of course, no infrastructure is insured at all. So the true losses from these two relatively small magnitude 7 earthquakes is staggering. Okay, let's go to LA. Okay, so here is another example of earthquakes also about 7. This is another 1-2 punch earthquake, first on the Newport Inglewood Fault, then on the Hollywood Raymond Fault. This kind of L-shaped rupture happens all over the world. Progressive earthquakes separated by minutes, days, months are also common. And this earthquake has the feature that Beverly Hills and Century City get hit twice at close range. So buildings that are damaged in the first earthquake essentially can get finished off in the second. So these are not outrageous scenarios. These are the kind of things that insurers have to expect and plan for and be ready for, and so do we. Now, I want to just finish by giving you a confession. And the confession is that I just moved to a new house 6 months ago. It's built in 1950s, has had a somewhere along the way an inadequate seismic retrofit. So what did I do? First, my wife and I put in solar cells and a battery. Okay. Then I'm embarrassed to say we just put an order on a hot tub, and I'm finally getting around to signing the contract to do the retrofit. So I did it backwards. I'm a hypocrite. It shows you how difficult it is for all of us to put money together for something that we're not certain is going to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen. So it's very difficult to make that decision. And it's difficult even for me, but it's the right thing, and it's what we must all do.
Thank you very much for that. And did you got the policy, or did you just sign the contract?
I'm just signing the contract today. In fact, as I began to think about giving a talk here, I thought I better ink this baby.
Okay, Ross, very good. We'll be back to you with questions in a little bit, okay? Aaron, I apologize. You were there. I didn't see you, but can we bring you on to talk about the city of Los Angeles and the announcement that the mayor had?
Yeah, by all means. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with my colleagues and partners in the seismic safety world. My name is Aaron Gross. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Los Angeles. I'm based out of Mayor Garcetti's Office of Public Safety, and it is my job to implement the city's Resilient LA strategy, which is a really broad document looking at all sorts of shocks and stresses that may present themselves to the city. But as a precursor to the Resilient LA strategy, Mayor Garcetti brought Dr. Lucy Jones on to work for him early in his administration, really to focus on what we all know is one of our primary challenges and threats, which are earthquakes. And they brought together academics and community members, experts from all over the region and all over the world to figure out where we should start, how we should focus our efforts towards resilience in the city, and specifically towards seismic resilience. And they ended up focusing the recommendations on 3 different areas. The first was water. As you probably know, Los Angeles is a desert, and we import a lot of our water from outside of the city of Los Angeles. And so one of the things that was identified as very vulnerable for the community of Los Angeles, the region of Los Angeles, was our water conveyance systems. And when the earth shakes, whether we're going to be able to provide enough water, clean and safe drinking water to the region. And so we put a lot of effort towards hardening our water structures, both in basin and beyond, the aqueduct, and looking at creating more local water. So if the earth does shake and we have a harder time getting water to Los Angeles, we can still have enough water supply for people as we repair those water conveyance systems. We also looked at telecommunication system. That was another communication in an emergency, specifically an earthquake, was identified as a high priority for the city. And so our Department of Water and Power has been working on strengthening a lot of our electrical systems. We've been working with telecommunication systems to strengthen the cell towers and make sure they've got backup power where we can have that. We also created mass communication systems, emergency notification systems. We've strengthened and coordinated with public safety agencies and community agencies around the region, with many of the partners on the call today, in this summit today. And we also created an app, the Shake Alert app, which is an app for your phone, which most of you, I hope, know about, where you can get early warning for an earthquake that may be coming up from a few seconds up to hopefully up to a minute or two, as a way to not only provide advance notice when possible, but also to have a resource in your hand, in your phone, about how to create an emergency guide, how to have a plan, what to have in a supply list. And that effort to have mass communications was actually adopted by the state, and now is coast-wide. Oregon and Washington and California all have an early warning system. And again, was identified as one of our primary concerns for earthquake safety. in the region of Los Angeles. The third thing that was identified by Dr. Lucy Jones and by all of the experts that came together were buildings. And buildings we recognized were our huge vulnerability. The city of Los Angeles is both diverse in population, but also in geography. And we, a lot of our buildings were built pre-1978. And so those buildings are vulnerable to seismic shifts. And so Mayor Garcetti, along with the experts and along with our planning department and building and safety, created ordinances literally requiring buildings to be more safe. As Tom went through some of the specifics, we looked mostly at soft story buildings and non-ductile concrete. We've also been looking at tall structures and looking at steel buildings and other ways to encourage people to do seismic retrofits. But as Tom said, Mayor Garcetti was really excited recently, just before the most recent shakeout, to announce that the city has been able to, through our promotion, through our requirements, through our supporting and encouraging people to retrofit their buildings, over half of the buildings identified as soft story vulnerable have been retrofitted in the city of Los Angeles. And again, as Tom said, this not only protects against buildings falling down, saving lives and saving property, but also in a city and a region which is so challenged with housing, with adequate housing and adequate affordable housing, retrofitting also protects our affordable housing. These pre-1978 buildings are really the meat of the affordable housing in the city of Los Angeles. So in addition to the people that are displaced during an earthquake, if we can minimize that number and we can really protect life and safety by encouraging people to retrofit, then that's what we are trying to do, and so far have been pretty successful. And we intend to continue along that path to get more people to retrofit. But one thing I wanna hit on is an important component of this retrofit work, that Mother Nature doesn't really care what city you live in. Mother Nature doesn't care where the boundaries of LA start and the boundaries of Culver City end, or all of we're in a county of 87 different cities. And we're down in Southern California, in addition to the 5 counties, where earthquake risk is everywhere. As you saw in some of the slides from Mr. Stein, earthquake faults are under all of the region. And so while the city of Los Angeles has been really successful in engaging and enacting these retrofit ordinances, it's essential. I say this because I know I'm speaking to a statewide and beyond crowd. It's essential that not only LA completes the retrofits, but that we share what we have learned with all of you and with other cities to see what we can do to make sure that these type of ordinances are enacted in other cities. Because not only are buildings vulnerable all over the region, but from a selfish perspective, a lot of the workers and residents in Los Angeles either work in other cities or live in other cities. And so it's important from an economic viability, what happens after an earthquake and how we recover. It's not, if the city of Los Angeles is protected, that doesn't mean that the region recovers in a way that it could if we all work together to enact these ordinances and encourage and subsidize, if possible, retrofitting of buildings and businesses to do our best to protect for an earthquake, but then also be able to recover coming out of an earthquake. I meant to talk a little bit about the cascading, how we see cascading challenges whenever there's a shock or stress, but maybe we'll get into that a little bit in the Q&A. But I will leave you with my stress point that there's so many things that we need to do to be more prepared, to be more resilient for earthquakes, but working together and learning best practices and teaching best practices and expanding the lessons that we've learned, expanding our ability to help people make their buildings safer is of utmost importance. I tend to ramble a lot, so I'll stop there. But hopefully we can get into more topics under the question and answer. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to participate in this discussion.
Thank you, Aaron. You covered a lot of ground, and we appreciate that. You know, it reminded me of the slide that was shown by the water presentation earlier. They had a fitting that had been placed on a building so that the water supply into the building did not break, or coming out of the building, whichever it was in that particular building. That was a small infrastructure step that people can take in whatever their setting is, whatever their particular environment is. You know that's a stress point. You know it's an area that is weak. You can act to mitigate that weakness, and maybe your operation continues after you've spent a few $1,000s on a fitting like that. You know, I think that's a great lesson for everybody that they can take back, you know, to their desk and maybe do something today, act on something today that will make a difference. Our next speaker is Mark Benthian with the Southern California Earthquake Center. And Mark has some interesting things to share with us. And if you've participated in the shakeout, Mark's the guy behind that. So globally, he's the only one I know that has a global job. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you very much, Tom. And I'm really happy to be with everyone here today. I'm going to share some resources and activities that we hope reach, inform, and inspire people across California and even beyond. And my home organization is actually the Southern California Earthquake Center based at USC. And one of the key things, of course, we do is study the natural laboratory of Southern California. And it's over 300 active faults that can have a magnitude 6 or greater earthquake really at any time. And you can see that there are faults that are more vertical, like the San Andreas and other major faults that in red, but then we have that can have even larger earthquakes. You see other faults here that are more like a broad ribbon of color. And that's the type of fault that the Northridge earthquake happened on, and others in our past, the San Fernando earthquake from 1971 and others too. So these are faults that are dipping in the earth, and the shaking comes up from below and can shake a very broad area in unexpected ways. And so a lot we have to be planning for in terms of the where the faults are, also understanding our forecasts of kind of like a long-term weather climate forecasting for where large earthquakes may happen in the future. And you can go to scec.org/USERF, which is the Uniform California Earthquake Rupture Forecast, a collaborative study for the USGS, California Geological Survey, and many universities under the Southern California Earthquake Center. And this shows that there are some key faults that are higher probability of having earthquakes, but we've had earthquakes since the study was published in areas that aren't as high as those, including the Ridgecrest earthquake sequence from 2019. The highest probability is the Southern San Andreas, and that was why the shakeout scenario back in 2008 focused on that particular earthquake. We coordinate our earthquake education and outreach through the Earthquake Country Alliance, a statewide group with many people around the state working together in sector-based committees and regional alliances with funding from Cal OES and FEMA. We headquartered at USC as well. We encourage all of you to join us. Go to earthquakecountry.org/join, really simple form to fill out information and to learn about our upcoming activities. Our key websites are earthquakecountry.org in English and terremotos.org in Spanish. We support Tsunami Preparedness Week each year, coming up March 21st to the 25th this year. Find out more and learn what to do to be safe during tsunamis, or know if you're in the zone, and register your activities you might do at tsunamizone.org. That's similar very much to the California Shakeout, which we created back in 2008, and of course has grown across the world. International Shakeout Day is October 20th this year, and here's my background for being under a table during an earthquake. So Our key activities follow the 7 steps to earthquake safety, what to do before, during, and after. We have a lot of great resources to support this information. So if you're looking to share with someone what they can do to be prepared to survive and recover, send them to our website, please, and they'll find all this there. We've also updated materials and now have them in 15 languages, the top 15 languages in California. You can find these new materials at earthquakecountry.org/languages. Many of them provide guidance for people with disabilities and access and functional needs. You can find those at earthquakecountry.org/accessibility. So I wanted to really key on a new documentary that's going to be coming out this spring. It features stories of people who experienced the Northridge earthquake and especially how they helped others, with learning moments tied to the 7 steps to earthquake safety. It really encourages everyone to become trained to be able to help others and be ready to survive and recover, CERT programs, and many others. But we've also added in a real key component on how scientists and engineers can reduce the loss of life and property with a focus on soft story apartment buildings. This film has interviews with people who were there and who helped each other, as well as scientists like Dr. Lucy Jones and Dr. Ken Hunnut, and engineers like Ken Odell, the president of the Structural Engineers Association of California. We also have archival news footage and right from there in 1994. And we have reenacted Hollywood style the stories of who we say are our heroes in this film. So it really is, you're about to see a trailer that showcases those stories and those heroes. I do want to say that the film has a special focus on the Northridge Meadows apartment building, which of course collapsed and had the most fatalities of any location in the earthquake, where the parking along the back of first story apartment units, which is supported by those thin poles, collapsed along with and the whole building collapsed onto those first story apartment units. And you can see we have footage of the firefighters going into the building, looking for survivors and others. So not only do we highlight that, we also show what to do to reduce those losses in the future. Here's Ken Odell showing with a model similar to what Ross was showing of a building like this, held up by the poles. It can fall over very easily, but if you put in the steel bracing like he's showing there, and like is shown on the right in an actual building, that can really prevent those losses, as was put together in what Aaron was showing, or talking about the Resilience by Design project with Dr. Lucy Jones and Mayor Garcetti's office back in 2014, and that has led to the ordinances we have now that really do need to expand across Southern California and the whole state. So I'm going to show the trailer and then talk just a little bit more right after that.
The day before the earthquake Sunday, we were just enjoying the game, yelling and screaming.
We went to the movies, so we came home, brush your teeth, get your pajamas on, and, you know, go to bed.
And I literally said to myself, oh, it's not like there's going to be an earthquake or anything.
I happened to be in the newsroom, and I turned to the editor and I said, narration take 1 in 5, 4, 3, 2. It's like, next thing you know, the whole room is just shaking.
So it was pitch black dark. We're feeling our way through the apartment, stepping on broken pieces of wall and ceiling.
We were trying to get out, but we couldn't because the door was jammed and I was screaming for help and nobody was helping us.
What I didn't see, my floor was severed. It had ripped apart.
I heard him underneath the wall and he was just screaming in fear, help me. Please, somebody help me.
It was so chaotic. People running, crying, screaming. You don't think, you just act.
And here this, parking structure's down. We're a single engine company, there's 4 of us, and we're it.
The life of a seismologist means not having all the information you need when people are asking you.
You don't have an epicenter, but you think this is south of the 118?
I'm looking them in the eyes. You don't have an option. You've got to get out.
Rico, we got to get on the air. And I said, well, yeah, of course. And they go, no, we got to get on. You're the only one here. And I thought, holy cow, in all of Los Angeles?
We had firefighters that were literally crawling through a crushed first floor.
I told him, you have to have faith. It's going to take time, but we're not leaving yet.
Look around you, wherever you're living, and say, am I ready for this?
You can do a better job at anything if you're trained. And the time for training is now.
Make sure your family's ready. Make sure your family has good instructions and the proper supplies. If you do that, you're the hero right there.
We can make it through this. We're going to work together. We're going to do this.
You can make a difference. You can make a difference. I mean, you can step up and make a difference in someone else's life. How awesome is that?
Okay, so just to sum up, the film we were planning to have across Southern California and the whole state, what we're calling Quake Hero Special Events. We've tested this. It's extraordinary to see what people do after seeing this film when we have partners from cities and counties and vendors with tables, which we tie to the 7 steps to earthquake safety so they can go around. They really want to take action. They want to sign up for training. They want to sign up for alerts. They're buying non-structural fasteners. Really exciting. So we're planning to have many of these. We're looking to have retrofitting forums, perhaps, in public events to really inform and inspire the need for these types of buildings to be retrofitted. So we're looking for partners to host these. We'll have a classroom toolkit for high school students to be able to watch the film and along with lesson plans that go along with it. And of course, an outreach campaign. So if you're interested in learning more about the film as it comes out this spring, perhaps hosting an event like this, you can go to the website, quakeheroes.org. Not much there, but you can sign up to get on our email list or just email us at info@quakeheroes.org. And for any other requests or information about other things I shared, you can just email me directly there at benthian@usc.edu.
Thank you, Mark. Excellent video. Are you in it?
Oh, I'm not. I have my own story from 1994, but I didn't put it in.
Okay. Well, that's a great video. And those types of things can help to educate people, make them more aware. And after awareness comes action. And that's what it's all about here. What I'd like to do, we've got about 10 minutes left. I would like to ask a question to the panel. I didn't see any questions in the chat. Let me just check one more time. No questions. So we're interested in talking or protecting the people of California, right? Whether they're businesses or people in apartments or whatever it might be, and protecting our economy at the same time. I'd like to ask each of you, earthquakes are too big to deal with as individuals. We can't stop them. But what specific recommendations do you have for what viewers can do to be catalysts for a more resilient California? And just jump on in if you guys want to answer that.
So I'll start, and I'll reference the trailer that Mark just showed, which, by the way, was frightening and pretty cool. I'm excited about that show. One of the things you saw was while there were first responders who were there and helping, more than you saw first responders, you saw neighbors. And one of the things that we try to focus on, at least in the city of LA, in addition to the retrofit work, is preparedness programs. There's a program that the Emergency Management Department runs and a lot of other nonprofits and partners run that are about mapping your neighborhood and about getting to know your neighbors and being able to identify who's a nurse and who's got an elderly relative and who's got pets and who's got a generator and who's got a chainsaw. And the thing that is most important that we teach with these seminars and bringing people together to talk about and map their neighborhoods is that it's really your neighbors that are going to save your life. When there's an earthquake, the neighbors are going to be the ones that are going to hear you and know about you and know where to look for you. And so I would say, to answer your question, what can the Southern California region do is really meet your neighbors. meet your neighbors and get a sense of who is where and what is where. So when the earth does shake, because it will shake, that we are more prepared and ready to deal with it when it does happen, so we can protect lives and recover more quickly. I'd start there.
Thanks, Aaron. That's a good start. Ross, do you have a comment?
I think what we should support and respect and appreciate is that governments in the state have stepped forward and done a lot of work. Obviously, City of LA, chief among them, and PG&E and Caltrans and Southern California Edison have done a lot of work. And that the building code has been enormously important in making sure that new buildings are built as well as we can. And the retrofit ordinances have been important. And all of those things are great. Where we have failed is letting people understand what their seismic risk is and inspiring them to make the changes to make themselves safer. In other words, it's coming through either government agencies or rules rather than decisions. Contrast that with solar cells. Nobody is forced to put a solar cell up, but people are doing it in great numbers, and they see the benefits and they see the value of it. And when you retrofit your home, it's invisible to your neighbors. When you put solar cells on your roof, it's like a sign. I'm more sanctimonious than you. I'm saving the climate. What about you? So the problem with the retrofit is it's not seen. We need to make it visible to people that your neighbor is doing something that you need to do. And then you can have that conversation with your neighbor. Why did you do it?
I'd like to add on to what Ross was just saying there. It's just so critical. You know, it's not even just a matter of making sure it's visible, but really it's in your interest that your neighbors have done that same work. If their house falls down and catches on fire, you know, that's going to be an issue for your home too. And, you know, the California Earthquake Authority and Cal OES have a program to provide funding to homes to get retrofitted at earthquakebracebolt.com. And, you know, and if that's available in your zip code, you could walk your street and hand out flyers encouraging people to do that work. If you have kind of older homes built on a raised foundation, what they call cripple wall foundation. That's one aspect of that. I also go back to Ross talking about his story and taking action just today, you know, before this call, and make sure that he's walking the talk. And I think that's important for all of us to be an example and to really, when you've done something, as Ross was saying, show it. That social science research says that's how you motivate change. People see other people like themselves taking action. That's why we do Shakeout the way we do. It's why we're showing this Quake Heroes film that we made that. People see people doing things that's real, and you can have conversations that are like, oh, you did that? How much did it cost? How long did it take you to do? Can you help me? Do you have the tools? That's when that really can happen. I think that from securing your furniture to securing your home to securing our infrastructure, you know, I think LA is an example to other cities and the ordinance that it has implemented, and that's just a very high level example of the same concept. And you know, meet people in your neighborhood and join together. Join us in the Earthquake Country Alliance. Those are really key aspects. And Tom, I don't know if you've noticed there are questions in the Q&A window too from earlier. There's one that's, do groups consider base isolation in seismic retrofits or new construction?
I'll take that one. New construction, a lot of the new construction is taking place that meets the newer codes. That's good. And some enlightened builders and companies are going beyond the codes to get a greater level of resilience. And I think that's good because that helps protect our economy and all of that. Base isolators are a particular technique that work on a particular type of building. What I would recommend to people, and I work for a seismic retrofit company, is to retain a professional structural engineer to evaluate your building. They'll tell you what your problems are and what your opportunities are and how you can best address the problems. Okay, and that's the way to get the best information, and you can rely on that information. If we think back to the collapse we had in Florida last summer, it was very important that they get a structural evaluation of that building and then act on what the structural recommendations were. And apparently they didn't. So that's a concern, and we need to address those kind of situations. Any last comments? We have about 1 minute left before Professor Frank is going to take control again.
I'll say there's a good one from Brady Guertin. How does a functional recovery standard fit into seismic resiliency? Is it important for both preventative measures and also response measures? And if so, how does a government, local or state level, decide where to prioritize funding between basically between mitigation and response?
If you mitigate, again, as a former city manager, if you mitigate enough, your response may be different. You may not have as many buildings damaged. You may not have the extent of disruption in your community that you could otherwise. You're still going to need to fund recovery measures, but if you invest in the mitigation in the front end, some estimates are that retrofits for apartment buildings can save $13 for every $1 invested. That's an important number to keep in your mind if you're an apartment owner and you're trying to evaluate what your options are with your building. But you do want to be able to invest in your buildings and get a return on your investment in terms of what the functional recovery of your building is.
Tom, perhaps the last one question that perhaps the panel can address is, do you think there is sufficient coordination, training between local governments, cities, counties, special districts, and critical infrastructure operators like telecom, power, water, etc.? And if there isn't, then what can they do in order not to be silo-like, which is something I mentioned earlier? So feel free, anyone on the panel.
Yeah, I would say no. There's some, but there's never enough. I think we need to share best practices, and I mentioned to one of the Q&A that Mayor Garcetti has been meeting since he started, been meeting with the 87 mayors of the County of Los Angeles to kind of share best practices, and seismic resilience has been a topic a couple of times. But no, coordination needs to be better. Communications need to be better for sure. Sharing resources needs to be better.
And Aaron, let me just tag on that there's a social equity issue here, because the larger cities like Los Angeles have the staff and sometimes the money to do the type of work that needs to be done in emergency preparedness. The smaller cities don't necessarily have the staff. They don't have the time. They don't have the resources. They don't have the sophistication even to deal with those issues. And that's where the cross-jurisdiction collaboration comes in, and there needs to be more of that.
Ross or Mark, anything to add? The last 30 seconds?
I could answer the last question that we received. Who's in a position to lobby for an insurance break for people taking personal actions? I think the person means, hey, if you retrofit your home, can you get a break on earthquake insurance? The answer is generally yes, but it's within some kind of small confines. It's not a giant break, but there is a break. The bigger picture is that only 15% or so buildings are insured in the state, and if a significantly larger percentage were insured, insurance probably would become unaffordable. In the weird world of insurance, there is not enough money out there to cover the true losses that the state would suffer. So we have to really be ready. We have to be strengthening our buildings, because insurance alone will never solve the problem.
Mark, any last thoughts?
One final question just came in about reaching out to residents and how to do it. It's, the social media or outreach events, say all of it, and then engage and keep the engagement going. It's not just a one-stop. Here's some information. You want to involve them and keep them engaged so that they're really taking it on as something that their community is committed to.
Thank you very much, you all, Tom, Ross, Mark, and Aaron. Has been a great panel. Really appreciate it.